Hey y'all, my name is Annie. Welcome to my channel, Eat, Drink, and Be Reading. And today I'm gonna finally be doing my June wrap up. For those of you who are new or haven't been around in a little bit, I am currently staying with my in-laws for a month or so. They live on a lake. I have 3 little kids. It gives us something that we can do each day, which is just impossible in North Carolina when it's 100 degrees to go outside every day unless you live on a lake or a pool or something. And so this is not my usual space. I do not have any of the books. No, because the only books I finished at the end of June here were on my Kindle. So I'm doing the best that I can, but I wanted to talk about the books that I read in June because I had a really great reading month. I read, oh my gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books, which is great for me. I'm usually like 4. But these were a lot shorter than typical. A few different YAs, a middle grade, and the 2 audiobooks were both like less than 6 hours. So I think it was similar amount of reading, but just with shorter books. So I felt like more. But let's jump into the books. The first one that I read is Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend. This is the sequel to Nevermore. This is a middle grade fantasy novel. It's kind of your like child savior, chosen one trope about a little girl named Morrigan. And I loved Nevermore. Read it in March. Forced myself to wait at least a few months to read Wondersmith, and I just loved it. And the 3rd one comes out later this year. And my husband read them, and he read both Nevermore and Wondersmith in like 1 or 2 weeks in June, and he loved them. And he's the one that went and pre-ordered the 3rd one. That also is a little bit of why I got a lot of reading done in June, because he was reading these 2 books and he wanted to spend evenings reading them, and so that helped. I would say I think I liked Nevermore a little better than I liked Wondersmith, and that is solely because I wanted like 100 more pages of Wondersmith. And like, yes, because I loved the world and wanted to be with the characters more, but mainly because there were a few aspects of it. There was like there's like a group of characters that I wanted more time with, and there was this, how do I explain it without giving something away? There is this kind of like bad place-esque that they discover that I wanted more time there. There were 3 or 4 things that I just felt were a little rushed. Like maybe there were just 1 or 2 mini plot points in that she tried to tackle. But I also loved all of them. I just wanted like 100 pages more. But this is a middle grade novel. It can only be so long. It was already decently long. So I still loved it. I think I gave it a 5-star, 4.5 or 5-star. I can't even remember now. But I really just wanted a little more with it. The second book that I read was The Night Country by Melissa Albert. I wish I had this one to show you. It is very pretty, but it is at home. And the cover, is gorgeous. And honestly, the prose, like what I love about this book is the prose is beautiful. The descriptions are gorgeous. Melissa Albert makes you feel like you are there, whether it is walking through this pretend fairy tale world or whether you are walking down the streets of Brooklyn. You feel like you were there, and it is just so gorgeously written. So this was another sequel. I will say that to the Hazelwood. And I definitely like the Hazelwood better. I loved the Hazelwood. But I felt like the prose was beautiful in The Night Country, but the pacing was weird. It felt really slow, kind of. I mean, interesting, but slow for the first 2/3, and like everything happened in the last third. of the novel, and it felt like it just happened so quickly. And so I enjoyed it. I'm glad I got to be with some of the characters again, but really the pacing was off for me. But I liked getting to experience the weird creepiness of the Hazelwood again. But yeah, it was fine. It was fine. The third book I read was I Captured the Castle by Dodie Smith. I read this for a read-along with, I don't know, like 10 or 12 of us. And we had like discussions going on Instagram, and it was so much fun. It was my first read-along, and I really loved it. I'm learning that I love to hear other people's points of view, and I love to hear it at the end and to discuss. But there's something really nice about hearing people think as you're reading. It makes me notice things that I maybe wouldn't have noticed before. And so I Capture the Castle is, I guess, like a modern classic, young adult classic. It's about 17-year-old Cassandra. I loved Cassandra as the narrator. This is written in her diary entries. She is witty and she is relatable. But I'll tell you what, every character except Stephen disappointed me at some point. There's a character named Stephen, and he is just perfect and wonderful, and we all love him to death. But all the other characters disappointed me, which I guess is real. I mean, that's real. People disappoint you. People make bad decisions, especially when they're young. I mean, what is it like? Your brain isn't fully developed till you're like 25. So, I mean, it's fine. It happens. But it's not the most fun to read when you're just like feeling like you're disappointed over and over and over again. And it wasn't the ending I would have wanted, but I appreciated the ending. And so that being said, like, the writing was spectacular. The narration was spectacular. I am so sorry if you hear like a boom, 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 boom. I don't know what's happening. Somebody's doing construction outside, and it is, I don't know. I apologize if you can hear it. Anyway, I'm sorry. I Captured the Castle. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. Like, I think it ended up with being a 4-star read. And while it wasn't the ending I wanted, I really appreciated the ending. And I think if she had left out the last line, I would have said, this is how it should end. This is great. I did not like the last line, and I don't know if I can get over that. I guess it was supposed to be like sweet and romantic, but it just annoyed me. Anyway, I feel like that made it sound like I didn't enjoy the book, but I did. I flew through it, couldn't stop reading it, really loved it. Okay, taking forever, I feel like, to get through this. Book number 4 is I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. I wanted to love this book. I really wanted to love it. I was expecting to love it. And let me tell you what I did love. I loved that we got to delve into Mexican and Mexican-American culture, that we got to, like, there was conversations about immigration, and it did not shy away from talking about depression. It did not shy away from delving into difficult parental relationships, into talking about kind of the differences between first and second generation immigrants, having immigrant parents. Like that part was fascinating, and I actually think a really important read. And that way I'm so grateful that I read it. But for some reason I didn't love it. I think it's because there was very little I could relate to, which is why it was so important for me to read. Like, I'm so glad that I read it, but it wasn't the most enjoyable. There was not a single character that I related to. And I don't know that there was a single character I really liked. Even as I wanted good things for them, I still didn't really like them. But that being said, I would put this into so many people's hands because of the conversations it has about immigration and depression and Mexican American culture. I felt like she dealt with those things really, really well. Okay, book number 5 was probably maybe my favorite book of the month, and I read it in like 2 days, and it is Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. This is a young adult contemporary romance, which I used to read a lot of, especially when I was nursing. I haven't read hardly any in the past couple of years. Heard about this one from Anne Bogle's Summer Reading Guide, and it sounded right up my alley. And let me tell you, it was like this book was made for me. The 2 main characters, both of their parents own restaurants. One owns what started out as like a small local restaurant and quickly became a like worldwide chain. And one has this little like deli sandwich shop in Brooklyn, somewhere in New York. And they get on this like Twitter war for they're each kind of running the Twitter for those companies, and these 2 teenagers, and they kind of, they get in this Twitter war, and they're trying to beat the other one out over a grilled cheese sandwich. And they also both go to the same school and end up both being like captains of like the swim team and the dive team, and have to work some logistical things out. I mean, it had Twitter, which I love, like so much that I'm not on it anymore because I would just dive down deep Twitter hole and never leave. And it had food, which I love. Teenage characters that I thought were just sweet and wonderful. And I really related a lot to the main character, the girl. It was made for me, and I loved it. And it was simple and easy and quick. And it was wonderful. I just loved it. Okay, the next 2 books are both the audiobooks I read. They're both nonfiction. They're actually both Christian nonfiction, at least Christian nonfiction adjacent. The first is All Things Reconsidered by Knox McCoy. I've talked about this a couple times on my channel as being expecting it. It came out on June 2nd. Knox McCoy is a podcaster. He is the co-host of the podcast with Knox and Jamie, which is one of my favorite podcasts. And I mean, so I bought it in some ways to support Knox, but I also liked what he was talking about. He's talking about how important it is to reconsider the things we've always believed, and that that's not bad, or it doesn't necessarily have to be scary. And I'll say this, no one mixes humor with profundity and pop culture with the divine quite like Knox McCoy does. And so if that's interest to you, I mean, if you want to laugh and think and hear both like why he, like hear an entire chapter of where he tells you all the words he's always mispronounces, which was hilarious on audiobook, just imagining him trying to get every single one of those words correctly. And an entire chapter on like what he believes about evolution or hell, or like it was such a beautiful combination, of the silly with the profound. The 7th and last book I read was Be the Bridge by Latasha Morrison. This is a book about racial reconciliation, particularly in the church, and kind of how the church can deal with reconciliation and how it needs to deal with the ways it has been racist and have allowed for, and even, what's the word? Empowered almost racism and inequality and racist systems in our country. This is the book I want to hand to people who feel like they don't really understand the Black Lives Matter movement, who maybe don't think it's really that big of a deal or important. Particularly people in the church. This is the book I want to hand to them. The way she talks about her own personal stories, the way she goes into history. She's telling stories the entire book, and it's really excellent. and I'm really glad that I read it, and I'm actually glad I listened to it. She narrates it, and a lot of it are her own personal stories, and they're heartbreaking. A lot of them are heartbreaking, but she doesn't she doesn't want you to sit in guilt. She calls for repentance and for hope and for reconciliation in a way that is generous and beautiful. And finally, I finished The Omnivores Dilemma. I started this in May. I had like a third of it left to finish in June. This is by Michael Pollan. It's nonfiction. It is it's a book about the food system in America, and both like industrial food and organic food, and gathering and hunting to get your food. I loved it. I laughed, which is crazy. I was convicted. It did everything a book should do, particularly a nonfiction book. And it's probably going to change the way that I buy our food. It's going to force me to do the things I always have wanted to do and just haven't because they're inconvenient. And yeah, I don't know that books can be better than that, than changing the way you think about something. So Michael Pollan is an excellent nonfiction author, particularly about food, and I cannot wait to read more of his work, although it's very long, so it might be a little while before I pick up something else by him. Speaking of long, this video is long. One of these days, I'm going to learn how to talk about these books a little bit faster, but I don't think that day is today. Sorry. What did you read in June? What are you reading now for July? Comment down below. Let's talk books. Yeah. I love it. I love it when we get to have conversations. So let's do it. Like, subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll talk again soon. Bye, y'all.